over to House Hoops on X, which captured this moment. And Breanna Stewart is talking about that, among other things.
For me, it's like, this is the first time we're in a revenue shared model. So before it was like, we had like a hard cap and we had a structure and you could have 220 max and everything else kind of trickled down. Now we're going to like really blow that out of the water, which is.
That moment of honesty might be the realest thing anyone involved in these CBA talks has said out loud. Breanna Stewart essentially confirmed what most people already knew but were afraid to admit. Only a small group at the very top, maybe 10 or 15 players, can realistically afford to miss the 2025 WNBA season. Everyone else is living season to season. They rely on that income. They don't have massive endorsement deals or alternative leagues guaranteeing security. And yet, even with that reality clearly understood, even knowing her stance affects players without her financial cushion, she's still willing to push toward a work stoppage. That forces an uncomfortable but necessary question into the open. Is this fight truly about fairness for the entire league, or is it really about protecting the interests and leverage of the elite few?
Talked about the conflict of interest, which really does figure into all of this. You have a Breanna Stewart and a Napheesa Collier who own a different league, yet they're the ones negotiating their, particularly Napheesa Collier, she's the one who's been out there. She's been talking a whole lot. And meanwhile, they're okay because they have a whole different league. And then Project B came along, and then Project B would be at the same time as a rival. So not quite sure how that's all going to work out. It's just a very convoluted type mess.
Here's the layer that makes this whole thing even more complicated. The conflict of interest Adrian Ross pointed out isn't some abstract idea. It's real. Breanna Stewart and Napheesa Collier don't just play in the WNBA, they literally co-own Unrivaled, a separate 3-on-3 league that just wrapped up its first season. So you've got players sitting at the negotiating table with the WNBA while also running a competing basketball venture. Add Project B, another international league getting ready to launch, and the picture gets even murkier. Suddenly, the loudest voices willing to risk a strike are also the ones best equipped to survive one. They have ownership equity, endorsement money, and alternative platforms. Most WNBA players don't. They've got rent due, bills stacking up, and no safety net if games stop. That imbalance is what turns this from a labor debate into something far more uncomfortable.
CBA players, it's like, well, we've signed however many CBA deals before, and we just don't want to get gypped. We don't want to feel like we're signing something and we're actually getting like screwed, because now we know how much you need us. We see the valuations between all the teams and all the things and the expansion fees, and it's like, no, there's a lot of money behind this, so like, don't forget to pay us too. So it's just really a back and forth battle.
Would you say y'all are prepared not to play this season? I know you want to, but would you say you're prepared not to play?
We've approved the strike authorization vote, which means that we're able to formally lock out whenever we want because we have majority of the players' votes behind.
Let's break down what's actually being offered, because this is where Breanna Stewart's claim about getting shortchanged starts to unravel. The leaked proposal that came out last week shows the WNBA putting a revenue-sharing system on the table for the first time ever. That's a massive shift away from the old hard cap model, where max contracts stalled around roughly $220,000. Under this new structure, player pay would be directly linked to league revenue growth, meaning when the WNBA earns more, player salaries rise automatically alongside it. That isn't players being cheated, that's exactly the kind of model they've been demanding for decades. Where things get trickier is Stewart pointing to expansion fees and franchise valuations, and she's not wrong there. The Golden State Valkyries paid $50 million just to join the league, and several existing teams are now being valued north of $100 million. Real money is clearly entering the ecosystem. So the debate isn't about whether players should earn more. They absolutely should. The real issue is whether the specific revenue percentage being demanded makes sense for a league that, by NBA Commissioner Adam Silver's own acknowledgement, has spent most of its history operating at a loss.
It's a WNBA season. We're prepared to do it, to not play, but we don't want to. We want to play because we know how important it is to be on the court for a number of reasons, for the people, for the fans, for the city. But it'll be something that's really tough if push comes to shove, because, you know, like you said, you're comparing apples to oranges. The W and the NBA, like, contracts are vastly different.
Very skewed, yeah.
So it's like, yeah, the top 10, maybe 15 players can survive without a W contract.
Right.
But the rest, it's like, no, you don't want to go that much without getting.
It feels like that strike authorization vote Stewart referenced looks unanimous on the surface, but the reality underneath is far messier. Reports coming out behind the scenes suggest real tension inside the players' union, with not everyone supporting the hardline approach. Several veterans, especially those without unrivaled deals or major endorsement income, are quietly advocating for taking the current proposal and moving on. They're staring at the calendar, knowing it's already February, that training camps are supposed to open in April, and they're checking their bank balances and realizing missing games means missing rent money. The problem is those voices aren't driving the public message. The union's tone is being set by star players who can afford to wait months without a paycheck, and that creates a serious internal imbalance. So when someone like Natasha Cloud calls accepting the deal stupid, she's speaking from a level of financial stability that most players in the locker room simply don't have.
Of making sure that we have, like, the amenities and the resources, and if we don't get what we want, we will sit out, but we don't want to do that.
So a few takeaways from what Breanna Stewart said. Number one, she said, we see how much y'all need us. Now, some people might strongly disagree with that. Are you really needed? Number two, she said, we don't want to be gypped. Now, I showed the numbers from the leaked proposal, reportedly leaked proposal last night. We've talked about numbers a number of times. I don't know how you can look at those numbers and feel that you're being gypped. And a lot of people feel the same way. Gypped? Interesting word for those numbers. Number three, she acknowledges that there are players who need.
First, when she says, we see how much y'all need us, that's a power claim. And a lot of fans immediately push back on it. Needed by whom, exactly? The league just posted its strongest numbers ever. Viewership exploded. Attendance jumped. Sponsors finally showed up in force. The product didn't feel fragile for the first time in decades. So when players frame this as the league needing them rather than a moment of shared growth, it lands sideways. Second, the word choice matters. We don't want to be gypped. When you look at the leaked proposal, first ever revenue sharing, higher caps, direct upside tied to growth, it's hard for many people to see how that equals getting shortchanged. You can argue the percentage isn't high enough. You can argue players deserve more. But calling that framework a ripoff doesn't square with the math, and fans noticed that disconnect immediately. Third, and this is the most important part, Stewart openly acknowledges that some players need to play. She knows that. She says it out loud. Which is exactly why the next line is so alarming. We don't want to strike, but we will if we don't get what we want. Not what's fair. Not what's sustainable. What we want. That phrasing changes everything. Because it confirms what many have suspected. This negotiation is being driven by the priorities of the top tier, not the reality of the majority. The stars can wait. They have endorsements, ownership stakes, off-season leagues, safety nets. Most players don't. For them, a missed season isn't leverage, it's financial damage, and the timing couldn't be worse. The WNBA is coming off the most successful season in its history. Caitlin Clark's rookie year alone drove national TV ratings up roughly 48% over 2023. Games averaged over 1.2 million viewers, with several breaking the 3 million mark. Arenas were fuller. Jerseys were flying off shelves. Sponsors who ignored the league for years suddenly wanted in. This was the long-awaited breakthrough moment, 28 years in the making. Now there's a real possibility the 2025 season doesn't happen. That's not just a labor dispute. That's a momentum risk. Casual fans don't wait around. They don't follow CBA details. They move on. And history shows that once momentum in pro sports is broken, You don't just flip a switch and get it back. That's why this moment is so dangerous. Not because players are wrong to demand more, but because the strategy being used threatens to burn the very bridge that finally brought the audience over.
Are not in that category. She understands that. Number 4, yes, they understand that, but they are still prepared to strike nonetheless. And they will. 5, if they don't get what they want, she said. So no, Breanna Stewart is not tone deaf. She is not lacking in understanding that this decision is a huge one that affects some people, most people, more than others. Others who own different leagues or who are playing in different leagues, who have money from endorsements, and whatever, the top players, they are not going to probably lose much sleep now over this decision if they choose not to play. Now, I say now because it would be a colossal mistake if they ruin this moment.
When Stewart compares WNBA pay to NBA contracts, it's important to be precise about what she's actually measuring. She's correct that the gap is massive. An NBA rookie minimum clears 7 figures, while the WNBA max salary in 2024 sat around $241,000. No one disputes that disparity, and wanting to narrow it is completely understandable. But the financial context doesn't disappear just because the comparison feels unfair. The WNBA brought in roughly $200 million in revenue in 2024, while the NBA generated about $10 billion, yes, billion with a B, nearly 50 times more. That revenue scale is why the NBA can support million-dollar minimums. The WNBA simply isn't there yet. What the leaked proposal introduces, though, is a revenue-linked pay structure that could dramatically change things if growth continues. Under that model, if league income doubles over the next 5 years, which isn't unrealistic given recent momentum, player earnings rise automatically alongside it. That kind of upside can be more powerful than locking in fixed salaries that quickly become outdated. The catch is trust, and Stewart's comments make it clear that trust in the league's long-term growth and follow-through is exactly what's missing.
Then, of course, you've got the players who would be seriously impacted by it. And I feel sure that they're saying, look, it is February. We got to start making moves and doing things. This is more money than I've ever seen. Let's rock and roll. So she's not tone deaf. She understands it. But at the end of the day, although she sounds conflicted, I'll give her that. At the end of the day, she's still saying, if we don't get what we want, despite those for whom that would be devastating, we're still going to strike. We got to get what we want. So if you've been wondering if she's considered other people, well, the answer is yes. Now, if you've been wondering, does she care in the sense of letting that affect their decision? Well, according to her own words, no, not that much. They still want what they want. So they're not ignorant. They're just not willing to budge, based on what she said.
This isn't some abstract labor theory debate anymore. It's February 2025. The clock is loud. Training camps are 8 weeks away. Schedules, arenas, broadcast windows, sponsorship activations, those don't wait on principle, they wait on signatures. And what's sitting on the table right now is, by every historical and structural comparison, the most progressive offer the WNBA has ever made. Revenue sharing for the first time ever. Higher minimums that materially change life for the bottom half of the league. Improved benefits. Better traveled out a framework that scales with success instead of freezing players into outdated numbers. That matters. Because this deal isn't built for what the WNBA was, it's built for what it's trying to become, and yet the union is willing to burn the season down anyway. Not because the offer is exploitative. Not because it ignores growth. Not because it traps players in poverty wages, but because the very top tier wants more leverage than the league's current economics can realistically support. That's the uncomfortable truth people keep dancing around. The stars driving this hardline stance are insulated. They have unrivaled money. They have endorsements. They have off-season income streams and ownership stakes. They can frame this as principle because missing paychecks won't change their housing situation or force them to rethink childcare or off-season training plans. The majority of players don't have that luxury. Breanna Stewart knows that. She said it out loud. She acknowledged that only a small percentage of players can afford to sit. And that's what makes this moment so jarring, because the knowledge isn't shaping the strategy. The strike authorization passed anyway. The posture stayed rigid anyway. The risk got pushed downward anyway. That's not solidarity. That's hierarchy. And the danger here isn't just financial. It's narrative. This is the exact moment the WNBA has chased for nearly 3 decades. Casual fans are finally locked in. Ratings jumped nearly 50%. Games are breaking 3 million viewers. Sponsors that ignored the league for years are suddenly competing for access. Networks aren't doing favors anymore. They're bidding. Momentum like that is fragile. You don't pause it and pick it back up later. Sports history is ruthless on this point. Once casual fans drift away, they don't come back out of loyalty. They come back for stars, moments, and continuity. Throwing all of this away for a slightly higher revenue-sharing percentage would be one of the biggest strategic mistakes in modern professional sports. Yes, the players have leverage right now. Real leverage. The kind that comes from genuine public interest, rising ratings, and growing commercial value. But leverage is temporary. It only exists in a moment, and if you misuse it, it disappears. Ask the NHL what happened after the 2004 to 2005 lockout erased an entire season. It took years to recover, and some markets never did. The WNBA does not have that margin for error. This league is still building its audience. Those 1.2 million average viewers aren't lifers. They're casual fans. They tuned in because Caitlin Clark was electric, because the games felt competitive, because it finally felt culturally relevant. Make them wait a year, and many of them won't come back. That's not opinion. That's how casual sports fandom works. And here's the cruel irony. The players who would be hurt most by losing that momentum are the same players who can least afford a strike. The stars will be fine. Breanna Stewart will be fine. She has unrivaled. She has endorsements. She has financial insulation. But the role players? The bench players? The women making $50,000 who were counting on this season to pay rent, cover childcare, and stay afloat? They don't have that cushion. They're being asked to sacrifice immediate financial security so the top tier can squeeze out maximum gains right now. That's not solidarity. That's hierarchy. A union exists to protect its most vulnerable members, not ask them to absorb the biggest risk while the least vulnerable control the strategy. Amenities don't pay rent. Resources don't replace missed paychecks. Moral support doesn't keep the lights on. So here we are. The league has offered the most progressive deal in WNBA history. Revenue sharing, higher minimums, better benefits, real structural growth. The Players Association has authorized a strike anyway. Neither side is blinking. April is coming fast. The smart move is obvious. Take the deal, lock in revenue sharing, let the league grow, then come back stronger in the next CBA. Build leverage instead of burning it. But that would require the players driving this negotiation to prioritize the collective future over maximizing power in this exact moment. And based on everything we've seen, that's not the calculation being made. Breanna Stewart understands the stakes. She admitted most players can't afford to strike. She knows the momentum could vanish. And she's still prepared to let it happen if the demands aren't met. That's not leadership. That's privilege masquerading as principle. If this ends with a canceled season, history won't remember the percentage points. It won't remember the bargaining posture. It will remember that the WNBA finally had its moment and chose to walk away from it. So here's the real question. Do the players hold firm and risk the season, or take the historic deal and build something even bigger from here? Because whatever happens next doesn't just decide this CBA. It defines the WNBA's next decade. Here's the layer that makes this whole thing even more complicated. The conflict of interest Adrian Ross pointed out isn't some abstract idea. It's real. Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier don't just play in the WNBA, they literally co-own Unrivaled, a separate 3-on-3 league that just wrapped up its first season. So you've got players sitting at the negotiating table with the WNBA while also running a competing basketball venture. Add Project B, another international league getting ready to launch, and the picture gets even murkier. Suddenly, the loudest voices willing to risk a strike are also the ones best equipped to survive one. They have ownership equity, endorsement money, and alternative platforms. Most WNBA players don't. They've got rent due, bills stacking up, and no safety net if games stop. That imbalance is what turns this from a labor debate into something far more uncomfortable.